Thanks, Hazel. Um, and to do this, to develop or update a national Arctic research plan every 5 years. So the Arctic Research Plan is a 5-year strategy for federal agencies to address emerging research questions about the Arctic. And it provides pathways to strengthen relationships between federal agencies, indigenous communities, academia, non-federal researchers, the state of Alaska, nonprofits, the private sector, and international organizations. And the plan does not encompass all of the work that federal agencies are doing in the Arctic research sphere, but rather really focuses on areas where agencies can work together and in partnership with the non-federal community to amplify the impact of their research activities. So we're currently implementing the Arctic Research Plan 2022 to 2026 and simultaneously seeking input on how it could be updated or enhanced or changed for the Arctic Research Plan 2027 to 2031. So on the next slide, we have a little bit of information on the process for the development process for the next Arctic Research Plan. We're collecting public and federal input through November 15th of this year. That input will sort of inform how extensive of an update or rewrite this will be, and what the rest of the timeline and process will look like. But we do anticipate having an additional public review period for the draft plan in late spring of next year. And then we're aiming to release the new document publicly early to mid 2027. And a few notes, the Arctic Research Plan is a federally drafted document, so federal agency staff will be reviewing and considering all input that's received and kind of write and then revise the plan as necessary. And then the final revised draft will undergoes a final interagency review and clearance. So as we're collecting input, on the next slide, we have two kind of main questions on what we're seeking input on. The first is, what are the critical issues and needs where federally funded science and technology research should provide knowledge to promote sound decision making? And what are examples of research questions that can address these issues? And we have, as we move into the sort of more listening discussion part of this meeting, we'll have some more guiding questions that focus specifically on observing and modeling related topics. But before we move into that, on the next slide, there's a number of different ways you can submit input to the plan. You can submit via a Federal Register notice. I think put that link in the chat. That's sort of our main way. We're pointing everyone to the FRN. You can submit directly on the FRN website. There's like a little button, and then you can just, like, a text box pops up, and you can just insert your input right there. And then on this page, you'll also find an email and a mailing address if you want to submit via post. We'll also be at Arctic Circle Assembly. We have a session on Saturday, October 18th at 2:25 local time. So anyone who's attending, would love to see you there. And a series of listening sessions being held, such as this one, by IARPC teams and communities. We have a number this week, next, and the weeks following. So be sure to check any of those out as well. And then finally, this last slide is just if you have any questions, if you're looking for more information about the development of the Arctic Research Plan, or if you just have any questions at all about the process, feedback, anything, you can reach out to us directly, a member of the IARPC Secretariat. I can put my own email in the chat as well. We're updating the IARPC website. We have a plan update page that's, it's pretty straightforward, but we'll be putting information there as it's available. But always here to answer questions and have a discussion. So that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer any process related questions if we have time. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to you, Hazel.
We have time for a few questions if there are any about the process, and otherwise we'll roll into an overview of the existing modeling and observing related efforts within IARPC, and then open it up for a broader discussion. Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, hey, thanks. Appreciate it. And thanks for that. I just have a question about submitting input to the Federal Register. This is more of like a strategy question maybe, but For those of you who don't know, I'm Thomas Fridge. I work at the Alaska Ocean Observing System, and I'm the coordinator of the Alaska Harmful Algal Bloom Network. And so, as part of the Alaska Harmful Algal Bloom Network, I wanted to provide some input to this plan. And I don't know if it makes sense for me to submit one input kind of on behalf of the Alaska Harmful Algal Bloom Network, but also like make sure other people can if they want, or if I should try to get as many people from the network to submit to something through the Federal Register. Like, is there a downside to doing that? I mean, I'd love everybody to like provide their own voices to it, but I don't know if there's a downside to doing that as opposed to doing one kind of consolidated input to the Federal Register. Any inputs on that?
Were you going to say something, Hazel?
No, I was gonna ask you to provide your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever works. I will say that the providing consolidated feedback on behalf of an organization or network is a common way to do it. And it's helpful. And often when people take this approach, there's a little bit of information on who was consulted or who was represented in that input, and that's helpful for us too. I mean, all input, federal drafting teams kind of consider all input equally. Um, so I don't think that, necessarily taking the approach of 20 separate submissions versus one submission that just notes that that amount of people kind of were a part of it. There's a big difference, but yeah. Margaret?
Yeah, I was wondering what your plan is for tribal engagement on this.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So we have sort of several activities to ensure that Indigenous input is received on the Arctic Research Plan. We're working with Tracy Curry, who is contracted through UIC and is a part of the IARPC Secretariat, and she's spearheaded kind of a targeted mail and email campaign focused on reaching Indigenous and tribal groups across Alaska. This has included follow-up calls to regional consortiums and also presentations and information sharing at different events and conferences. I believe, yes, she will also be at AFN in a couple of weeks. There'll be a booth there, and is doing some more targeted and direct outreach, but mostly via email, phone, and then via some conferences and outreach events. Any other questions?
Okay, if any come up, feel free to add them to the chat or include them in the rest of the discussion. And with that, I think up first we have David Allen from the Monitoring, Observing, Modeling, and Prediction team.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Really excited to hear from you since this is a listening session. Welcome to the Monitoring, Observing, Modeling, and Prediction, or MOMP, listening session. My name is David Allen. I'm a program manager at NOAA in the Arctic Research Program that sits within the Global Ocean Monitoring Observing Program, and co-lead of MOMP with my colleague Sally McFarland from the Department of Energy and Kiki Schultz of the University of Texas at Austin. Our goal in MOMP is to integrate and improve monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction efforts to advance Arctic research through 4 objectives that you see here on the slide, as well as the multiple objectives that are under each of the, or multiple deliverables that are under each objective. And just as a reminder, we work across the entire, as a foundational element, we work across the entirety of the IARPC enterprise and beyond to implement MOMP with communities of practice, priority areas, foundational areas, other NSTC subcommittees, and beyond. So the objectives include, and I'm just going to do this very high level because you're going to hear from a couple of different groups that actually are focused on various of the deliverables. But MOMP 1, to coordinate activities in communities of practice that bring together Arctic modeling, observing, monitoring, and prediction to advance Arctic research. That covers about 4 deliverables. Then MOMP 2, support assessment, gaps analysis, and intercomparisons to understand observational and modeling needs in Arctic research. Another 4 deliverables. Support coordination and engagement with federal, state, international, and non-federal partners who are conducting a monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction in the Arctic. And then finally, support best practices in field observations and modeling. And that's 3 objectives. And since the rest of this modeling webinar won't cover the deliverables under MOMP Objective 1, I'd just like to note that there has been quite a lot of activity by the MOMP group under the various deliverables under this objective, but we don't have time to necessarily cover those today. Can we go to the next slide, please, Hazel? So what you're going to hear about next is from 3 different communities of practice: the Field Operations Community of Practice, the United States Arctic Observing Network, and the Modelers Community of Practice. And you can see the deliverables that are associated with each of those groups here. Hopefully that'll at least give you a flavor of the kind of work that we're actually accomplishing under MOMP. But obviously this is just the I'll go ahead and use the cliche, the tip of the iceberg for this work. So to get into the depth, why don't I start by turning it over to my colleague Mary Beth Armstrong to discuss the Field Operations Community of Practice. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. Excited to hear some feedback. I am one of the co-leads of the Field Operations Community of Practice, along with David Allen, as well as Katie Smith and Renee Crane from the National Science Foundation. I'm also at the Arctic Research Program with David as a Knauss Fellow. Under the Field Operations Community of Practice, we have 2 sort of deliverables that fall under us. The first being MOMP 3.2, which is to coordinate among state and federal agencies that support fieldwork, share information among researchers, Alaska communities through both the vessel matrix and the mooring matrix that are both up on the IARPC website. We also host pre-field and post-field season meetings to share sort of research activities that have been going on or will be going on in Alaska and the Arctic. The second being MOMP 4.1, to build on existing efforts within federal agencies to implement best practices for improving field safety, both in terms of physical safety while working in harsh environments, but also in terms of safety from harassment and hostile working conditions for the folks that are out there. Next slide, please. So to speak to the ways in which these have been operationalized a little bit within the Field Operations Community of Practice, first with MOMP 3.2, as I mentioned, we have the vessel matrix and we have the mooring matrix. The vessel matrix is the myriad of ways in which it is presented is first through an Excel or a PDF file that give you a lot of information about which vessels are going to be out in the Arctic during the season. It includes information like the dates that are going to be out there, the vessels that are going to be out there, the research activities that will be going on those vessels, as well as point of contacts, and also some outreach activities that are planned by the scientists that might be on board. In addition to that, there is also a website that sort of just lists out all of the vessels that are going to be out, as well as a Google Calendar that anyone can add to their calendar to sort of see what ships are out when. The second is the mooring matrix. And so you can see that on the other side here. Sorry. And the mooring matrix historically has been an Excel file that anyone can download and use the data from. And then recently we have put up an interactive ArcGIS map, and you can see that here. And so it is interactive. You can zoom, scroll, and click on any of the moorings and see the same information that is pulled from the spreadsheet there, just to visualize it a little bit more. But both of those are available on IARPC's website. Now, next slide. So the second one here is MOMP 4.1, which again, we continue to partner with and focus on field safety, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and ethical and inclusive work in Arctic communities. And so there is a myriad of existing principles that we follow, including IARPC Share Principles, the Battelle Arctic Gateway, Maintaining an environment of respect aboard ships, as well as the code of conduct there, and all our links that I can pop in the chat as well. I think this is also an area in which we're looking forward to having some renewed effort in the coming weeks, months, as well. Right, I think that closes me off. I'm not sure who I'm passing it to, so we'll.
That is back to me. Thank you, MB. Yeah. Sorry, I am getting over the tail end of a cold here, so bear with me. I'm going to share a little bit about one of the other communities of practice within IARPC called the U.S. Arctic Observing Network. The U.S. Arctic Observing Network is also a sub-body of IARPC, so it's an initiative that was already existing and has been running since 2017. For those of you that have been in the IARPC space for a long time, we used to have a observing related team called the Arctic Observing Systems team. And that team was recently renamed to more closely mirror the U.S. Arctic Observing Network initiative as a whole. And that initiative is focused on strategy and planning in Arctic observing. And so this change strengthens the link to the IARPC supported U.S. Arctic Observing Network deliverables, and it also clarifies kind of the lane that our team is in relative to the MOMP team and the field operations team as well. And I'm one of the co-leads of the U.S. Arctic Observing Community of Practice, along with Sandy Starkweather, who's on the call, and Lauren Culler from the National Science Foundation. And what we aim to do with this team is to provide some support for strategy and planning initiatives within Arctic observing within this broader collaborative space. So we've historically and will continue to host these pre and post Arctic Observing Summit meetings where we kind of bring together the U.S. contributors to the Arctic Observing Summit provide some discussion before and after on relevant topics before this biennial big international conference. We've also hosted presentations on various U.S. Arctic Observing Network related projects, such as our current initiative on risks and hazards. And then we've had meetings organized on topics that the U.S. Arctic Observing Network Board and initiative is also working on more broadly, things like inventories, technology, and we were able to host a big showcase event at the Arctic Science Summit Week this year, which some of you may have attended. And so look forward to your feedback in terms of how we can continue to connect with the community and sort of what our best role is. And with that, I will pass it to our modeling co-lead, Wilbert Weyer.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wilbert Weyer. Indeed, I'm a co-lead of the Modelers Community of Practice, along with Renew Joseph, Hannah Mavenkamp, and Lauren Andrews. Richard Colleter is also on the call here today. He used to be a long-time lead of this team, and much of the success of it can be attributed to him. So we kind of been contributing mostly to two deliverables that are shown here. Provide support for researchers to participate in existing Arctic-focused model intercomparison projects to understand gaps in modeling and predictability of the Arctic system. And 3.1, support participation of U.S. researchers in international Arctic modeling and prediction efforts in order to improve the predictability capabilities of Arctic models. Next slide. We organized a whole bunch of webinars. One of the kind of signature series, I think, is what we can call them, is a series on Arctic biases in U.S. Earth system models. We had 4 sessions in this series. All of them were about 2 hours. And for these sessions, we invited representatives of the U.S. modeling centers to discuss how to address very persistent biases in Earth system models. So far, we have 4 sessions discussing biases in Arctic Ocean stratification, Arctic clouds and the surface energy budget, permafrost carbon processes, as well as the Arctic marine carbon cycle. The team also had support for the Consortium for the Advancement of Marine Arctic Science, which is an activity that's supported by Department of Energy's Earth and Environmental Systems Modeling Program as contribution to the Highlight project. So we had two sessions discussing this activity and the progress that was made. So CAMAS is bringing together Arctic marine system scientists, both modelers and observationalists, to collaborate on collaborative projects to advance our understanding, as well as the model representation of important processes in the Arctic marine realm. And next slide, please. We also had a bunch of sessions on forecasting and predictability, in particular of Arctic wildfires, Arctic sea ice, 2 sessions on tipping points in the Arctic Earth system. And we had a couple of sessions that were focusing on methodologies and that were either modeling related or associated with modeling activities. We had sessions on discussing the use of large ensembles for addressing Arctic issues, as well as the CMIP7 ensemble. We had sessions on data assimilation, as well as sessions that discussed the combination of modeling and machine learning. So, and I think these are all topics that would continue to garner interest for this community. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Hazel, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll actually pass it to David, who's going to be moderating the discussion today.
Sounds good. So thanks to all of our presenters and the IARPIC Secretariat for the continuing fabulous support that makes all of this possible. Now we're getting into the important part of the session, which is hearing from you. So again, this is extracted. These questions are extracted in some form from the Federal Register notice, so you might recognize some familiarity here. But what are the critical issues and needs where federally funded science, engineering, and technology research should provide knowledge and promote sound decision making at all levels related to the Arctic? So that's the high level question, and then I guess we could take these questions in turn. But as it relates to monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction, what research topics should be emphasized to address these needs? What updates should be made to the 2027-31 Arctic Research Plan? And the converse also is important. What items should stay the same? Since sometimes those immutable things or those really important things can sometimes get lost in the shuffle of folks being interested in change. So I wonder whether anybody wants to raise their hand or come off mute. Again, the raise your hand function in Zoom is under the reactions key. Or you can also offer questions or comments in the chat. But our goal is to dedicate this next half an hour to listen to your comments and thoughts. And I will note one thing that I did want to mention to you is that if you're a registered person on IARPIC collaborations, you can track the progress of under each deliverable by clicking through on those actual individual team links, and you can see what the progress related to each deliverable actually is, and really track the progress toward all of those goals. And I will turn, it looks like Amy maybe got to the buzzer first. So Amy, you want to offer your comment? And then I'll get to you, Vladimir.
Sure, thanks. And hi, everybody. It's been a long time since I've saw some folks. 2 questions, and those who know me won't be surprised by this. Could you repeat, was there a effort to have, how are we dealing with people who do operational forecasts, operational things? Has there been a session to kind of reach out to folks in those parts of the agency to understand what areas of science they would like to be worked on? How are we handling that right now?
That's a good question. Amy, you mean in terms of getting feedback for the Arctic Research Plan specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What science is needed by service providing federal operational entities? Take the Weather Service as my favorite example, right? They have lots of improvement they could love to make, but they don't have the science to bridge a few gaps. So that's awesome. Secondly, is thinking about this administration and thinking about just support of the nation in general. Have there been efforts to reach out to industries to understand what science the federal process IARPC can do to help us be the best country in the world?
So let's see. First off, I would say that to your operational question, it has been it's an ongoing challenge that we try to deal with to actually garner that input from operational entities. I would love, and I know we've talked about this many times, Amy, over the years, to have more folks who represent operational portions of the agency actually in the IARPC enterprise. But I can say that also our RPIs in the Arctic Research Program, and I think across the enterprise, actually have a regular dialogue with folks who are actually trying to provide products and services that allows them to, particularly in our program, we see ourselves as a sort of service and a research development portion of the agency to serve all of the operational needs of the agency. So we're not, in other words, we're not doing anything that wouldn't eventually serve some operational need. But I do think, but to your original to the original purpose of your question, I don't think there's actually a dedicated session to engage those operational entities within the agency explicitly in updating the Arctic Research Plan. And unfortunately, we also didn't garner any input when we sent out the agency update across the agency through the Arctic Executive Committee and beyond. We didn't get any input from others about their research needs. So we'll have to rely on those PI to operational entity interactions to sort of drive that continuous connection.
Hey, thanks, David, and thanks all for working on it. Sorry, I'm not still in there to run some meetings or something for you. I would also say, I think maybe Arctic Circle, you might be able to get some feedback along those lines. And then, just as always, trying to bring our science to understanding of the general public to any extent that we can talk about, here's an issue that related to something we're trying to advance through the government, and here's how IARPC is addressing it and how we're putting it together. Thanks, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, and I just wanted to respond to your second comment as well. Is that I believe that there are certainly efforts at NOAA, and I believe there are efforts in other agencies as well. I haven't seen a lot of public information about this yet, but trying to explore that public-private nexus to understand what the appetite and interests are of the private sector in becoming engaged in the research enterprise itself, as well as observational and other pieces. And you also seen a rapid expansion of AI tools, AI and machine learning tools that, at least in terms of their availability, across the federal agencies. So I expect that we will continue to explore that. but it's really still an open question what the appetite and interest is of the private sector in spaces like observing, like modeling and prediction, and really the entire enterprise. And so I have got 3 hands up. Hazel, Serena, were you going to respond to in part or in toto to Amy's question, or were we going to ask different questions?
I was just going to really quickly note that we do have a sort of separate process for soliciting input from federal agencies that where we have a separate task or process that goes to each of the IARPC federal agencies, and then that agency submits consolidated input back directly to IARPC. So we are reaching out and working with all of those agencies, and anyone who's a part of those federal agencies can, of course, submit input as an individual. But there is that we're speaking sort of more broadly to the public input, but there is a separate process for making sure that we get federal input as well, just overall.
And Hazel?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just reading this comment in the chat, which looks like I might need a moment to read all the way through it. So I'll just say, Amy, to your point, the other piece I would bring in, which isn't directly related to the Arctic Research Plan, but is that the U.S. Arctic Observing Network has been doing some gaps assessment work around where the gaps are in the Arctic Observing Network and data systems, and those have been really operationally focused. We're working on some write-ups now about coastal flooding and wildfires, and also have one about aviation weather. And so I think that's a piece that, if we're able to continue that in the next Arctic Research Plan, does bridge those sort of like research question needs, observations, and then the operational piece. And I know we've talked to you about that effort before, so you're already familiar, but just to say that again for other folks in the room.
Awesome. Richard, did you want something on want to provide something on this subject, or did you want to offer a new question? Because I'll take Vladimir.
I had a different topic. Yeah.
Okay. Let me get to you after Vladimir. But thanks. Vladimir, please ask your question.
Yeah. Thank you. So it seems like in what you presented and others presented, it was emphasis on federal agencies. But what the role of universities in this process, and especially in changing funding environment? So how university can participate in this? The usual way was NSF, but it seems like there is lots of changes, and I'm not sure how it will turn around. And I'm specifically worried about permafrost because there is no federal agency kind of really responsible for permafrost. Some of them say they do, but not really, especially in observing part. So what's the role of universities in this process?
That is a great question, and I recognize that there is a great deal of uncertainty that we've experienced as the new administration has come into play. I can say that for the first time, I was sharing this with Hazel and Serena before this meeting started, that we finally have one of the first, I think, organized articulations that I've seen from this administration on research and development priorities, from literally the first R&D memo from Russell Vought and Michael Kratsios. If those are to be taken seriously, then polar research will continue to be a priority, and possibly even be an elevated one going forward. I'll share that link when I get done speaking, but I would say that the universities at least from my programmatic perspective, and I believe from most of my colleagues at other agencies, that the universities are this powerhouse that drive all of this work. It would be impossible to implement IARPIC without the universities, and I don't expect that dynamic will necessarily change. And I do recognize also that permafrost does tend to get caught in between because there's no specific agency that has a dedicated remit to permafrost, and as a result, it's spread across multiple agencies. But given the threat of permafrost and warming of permafrost and its impact on global climate, as well as more locally infrastructure and just general quality of life, I expect that that permafrost will continue. Permafrost and permafrost observations will continue to be an important emphasis. And I can say that all of that while recognizing that there is a great deal of uncertainty at NSF and upheaval, but I expect that eventually those changes will subside and we will land on some kind of trajectory that will be better. I saw Roberto Delgado on the call, and I don't know whether he wanted to reflect specifically on NSF at this time, and yeah, and if not, I will just maybe let those comments stand. But I do think what we will walk away with from this meeting is that we need to continue to have a focus and an emphasis on permafrost research to make sure that that continues, that community as well as those research topics continue to be covered and supported. Thank you. Richard, do you want to go ahead with your question? And sorry to make you wait.
That's fine. So way back when I was on the modeling team, we spent a lot of time discussing CMIP experiments, the design of the CMIP experiments, the design of the models, the model output, the implications of the model output. And so it's my understanding that agencies, I guess I'll be judicious here, will have a substantially reduced footprint for this upcoming CMIP, or perhaps more. And so to me, this would have, far-reaching implications for IARPIC. I think some of the research plan, previous research plan, some of the points were designed around CMIP. And so I guess my general question is, are we in the post-CMIP era? And what does that mean? Should there be more of a focus on numerical weather prediction to seasonal to decadal? That seems like, an easy answer. On the other hand, CMIP output, is used widely for things like, various long-term planning, like infrastructure planning. I'm thinking of sea level preparedness and things like that. And so if we are in the post-CMIP era, how are those concerns for the Arctic addressed?
Thanks, Richard. That's a huge, obviously that's a huge and uncertain topic at this time. And I'm afraid I'm not, in my former role, I would have been able to provide more comments from a USGCRP perspective. But where I currently sit, I'm afraid I don't have a lot to say about that. But maybe we should try to think about how we articulate in this coming IARPIC plan how we rely and why we rely on these model intercomparison project outputs in the longer term, and how our lack of connection to them as a country potentially really sets the United States back. And I don't know whether Wilbert and Lauren, whether you have additional comments on that, but I think I think it's a relevant point, and we need to figure out how to continue our involvement to the extent that that is possible and that we're allowed to do, and of course that we're appropriated resources to do. Wilbert, Lauren, any additional comments on that topic?
I do not. I know that in Department of Energy is moving away from the centennial and multi-decadal timescales to really the decadal timescale modeling and predictability efforts. And I see Daniel and Renew here online. They may be able to provide some more perspective on where the DOE Office of Science is going. I don't know if Lauren has any insights from her area.
I would say that we're seeing similar things here at NASA, more toward the sort of decadal timescales. But I will say that I think that it looks like Roberto just linked something from OSTP that recently came out, and there are a few other things just emphasizing the continued research in the Arctic, and I think and research of change in the Arctic, and I think emphasizing that could be the way that we sort of support these sort of prediction and predictability efforts.
Yeah, and I've just shared the language on polar regions research from that R&D memo. I definitely recommend that you take a look at this. This is literally hot off the presses from released yesterday, and I think it actually really provides an encouraging view to what we may be able to expect in the IARPIC space going forward. And it's frankly, the outlook is much more encouraging than maybe we've been thinking for the last few months, shall we say. And I also bear in mind that the goal of this session was not necessarily to provide you with answers and be a Q&A, but rather to discuss items that you feel we should be providing greater emphasis for, or new topics wholly presented to the research enterprise that we should be focusing on that may not be represented in what we're currently doing. And I'll also note that converse again, anything that we should actually keep doing or doing the same. Yeah, so just bear that in mind. We're not going to have all the answers today, and I'm afraid that the rate of change and the type of change that we're experiencing in all of the agencies is still massive. So hopefully that will start to slow down, and we'll start to see a more clear trajectory form for Arctic research and the research enterprise in toto. Sandy, do you want to provide a comment?
Yeah, I guess there's a specific type of feedback I'd be interested to elicit from folks on the call, and I see the groups getting smaller as we go. But we've witnessed that the plan itself tends to result in the kind of social team collaborative structure that implements it. And over time, the team structures have continued to grow, sort of more complex, different teams taking on different aspects of issues. And from people who engage in these meetings, I guess I'm just curious, and that's also a form of feedback I think you could recognize, that thinking about something like, how has it worked to have a priority area that is grouping together modeling, observing, monitoring, and prediction? How has that worked in terms of the things that you care about? Has it been instrumental in having conversations that you wouldn't otherwise be able to have? And so I think rather, we can talk about the specifics of different topics and also, but also just to think about the structure that we're operating in and what's going to make for effective progress, effective use of people's time, we are, of course, commenting on the plan itself, not on the team structure, but they're very related. And so I think it's useful to kind of look down the road a little bit and say, how can we organize things so that we have the highest value conversations?
Thanks, Andy, for those comments. And I do encourage folks to reflect on that. I certainly have some opinions, but that's not. I have other ways to provide my input to this whole process. But I encourage everyone to reflect on that and either provide comments now or through the FR notice that will continue to be out there. And I believe it's already linked in the chat here. And I've noted that Tobias and Margaret have offered comments in the chat. I wonder whether either or both of you want to come off mute and share your comments with the group.
Sure, I can do that.
Good. Welcome. How's it going?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Having walked in the human behavior aspects of change in Arctic, especially in Alaska, I feel like the observing networks often focus on environmental changes rather than human behavior changes. And I was wondering if that could be an aspect that could be more emphasized. For example, my work focuses on invasive species management, where pathways into very remote areas, long distance pathways, are an increasingly great deal to get new organisms that have not been found in Alaska into new areas and conservation areas. So that's a big concern, and the research is moving forward. But maybe that could be emphasized a little more in the next research plan. And related to that is also an issue that's going on, especially in Europe, and has been going on in Alaska, which is related to security. These unmanned vehicles, automated vehicle systems are becoming increasingly a threat to our airspace, to our marine environment. And so I believe our communities, our local communities in rural Alaska especially, are kind of like a first response that hasn't been quite utilized yet. I think there needs to be more research to really focus on that community aspect, on that first responder being right on site, observing. Obviously, that's those communities have been for thousands of years observing changes on the land, but I also think they could be more involved on that security aspect that's increasingly becoming a real big deal, because we can't really send our F-35s to shoot little papier-mâché, whatever, little wooden drones out of the sky. That's just a response that long-term is way too expensive for these fighter jets to intercept drone threats coming from the border to Russia, for example. And I just wondered to what we need some new approaches, perhaps, and need to do more research on that, on security aspect. Thank you.
So absolutely, thanks for offering your comment vocally here, and I agree with you. And I know that several of the principles, so our higher level body is called the IARPC principles, and several of them have also emphasized the need to focus more on the national security and domain awareness, domain presence aspects of the enterprise. And I believe that some of that is going to be visible, some of that's not going to be visible. What's new in your comments is this whole idea of actually using our Arctic communities as sort of that first, trying to figure out how to build that observing element, the human observing element into that picture. And I think it's, frankly, even in the environmental observing space, it's still a relatively underutilized capability that we should be using. So appreciate your comments. And I also appreciate the comments about a greater emphasis on invasive species, especially as we start to experience more warming and change in the Arctic, because we're certainly seeing that in the marine environment on which my program certainly focuses, which is impacting fisheries and all kinds of other elements. So great points, and we'll certainly take those under consideration. Thank you. And Margaret, did you want to provide your comments?
Yeah, sure. I was just building on when Vladimir was talking about permafrost in the sense of really also prioritizing not just the research, but the services part of it, because there's really a lack of understanding in Alaska about permafrost for policy decision makers, engineers, community planners, and that type. And so having an actual effort to focus on developing those communications, making permafrost information more accessible to those groups would be really beneficial.
I think that's an excellent point, and I agree with you that it's Alaska in general is not, unless you've spent a fair amount of time there, is obscure to most, and the services that are provided by the environment itself are often are lost on many different people, and even communities in Alaska themselves. So I like the idea of also talking about not only the research but also the services piece, and we will certainly take that under advisement, and we'll probably come back and lean on you and others like Vladimir to figure out how to actually implement and share that information. And it may come through, ACAP and other service providing organizations that have already those embedded roots in communities.
I think that'd be good. I also know you have CREL associated with IRPIC, and I think also that avenue, but generally they don't do that type of work. It's not really within their mandate, but I think they'd be a good partner in this as well. I know they've done some engineering types of stuff, so.
Yeah, I think it's for CREL, they may have the observations, and I agree that because they have the data, would be great partners. But I don't know that they necessarily would be. They're not necessarily as service oriented, except to them themselves to serve their own agency needs. But I agree that's a very good point, that we can try to bring that into the bring greater emphasis into that into the plan. So I guess we're
I'm sorry, and actually, military community is part of the community in the Arctic, so it's part of us. Yeah, the community of military which CREL is working with, so it's pretty much integral part of our Arctic community in Alaska.
That's a great point. Yeah. So we're at the. Anybody wants to get in before we break off, and remembering, of course, that we'd still have the FR notice live for another almost 2 months or a month and a half. So anything that you didn't get a chance to say here, or you said here and you wanted to refine and share through the FR notice, you're of course welcome to do. But really appreciate the great questions and comments that were provided here, and we will certainly take them back to the planning process and likely engage you as we try to implement in the new planning horizon. And again, thanks to all of our leaders of communities of practice and foundational areas and priority areas today for the presentations. Thanks also to the IARPIC Secretariat for, again, Herculean and superb effort. And thanks to all of you for coming and providing your comments.
Thanks, everybody.
That's good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll call it a day.
Thanks.
Thanks so
Have a
much,
good day.
everyone.